The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world, having been continuously inhabited for close to 6 millennia. The old walled city that occupies an area of less than 1 square kilometer is sacred in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the most sacred place in Christianity, where Jesus was both crucified and entombed before rising from the dead. The site where Solomon's and Herod's temples were located is actively debated. The only thing the researchers seem to agree upon is that it was somewhere on the Temple Mount. Locating the temple precisely is a priority for Jews, because the rock of foundation within the temple's Holy of Holies is the most sacred place in Judaism. For centuries it has been assumed that this rock is the same stone whereupon Abraham nearly sacrificed Isaac, and from which Muhammad ascended into heaven, namely the bedrock upon which the Dome of the Rock stands today. You can see in this cutaway how the Sufi shrine was built to worship this bedrock. My favorite theory comes from Dr. Asher Kaufman in 1991. He claims that the Jewish foundation stone is located just north of the Dome of the Rock, in a small section of exposed bedrock currently under the diminutive Dome of the Tablets. The echo of tablets in the dome's name is actually circumstantial evidence suggesting correlation with the tablets of the 10 Commandments. These most famous tablets were stored in the Ark of the Covenant, which of course was located within the Holy of Holies within Solomon's temple. However, the main reason I subscribe to this theory is that it fits the larger geometry of the city, as proposed by John Michel and Christine Rohn in their book 12 Tribe Nations. Michel and Rohn have drawn a 5 by 12 rectangle over Jerusalem, matching the proportion of rectangles we've studied all over the world. The Jerusalem rectangle is anchored in the ancient Jaffa Gate, an opposite city wall corner point here. Its right edge parallels the Temple Mount. Richard Heath showed in Sacred Number that when we draw equal x's within the rectangle, the crossing points pass directly over the rock of Calvary inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus was crucified, and over the Jewish rock of foundation under the Dome of the Tablets. In other words, these x's precisely mark the holiest spots in Christianity and Judaism. Measuring the rectangle uncovers something more. The length is equal to 1,728 cubits of 1.728 feet each. That's a double reference to the number we learned in Washington, D.C. symbolizes a cube. In Judaism, the Holy of Holies within Solomon's temple had very specific proportions, as described in the Torah. It was a cube measuring 20 cubits on each side. The holiest spot in Islam is Mecca. More specifically, it is the Kaaba within Mecca, which all Muslims are supposed to visit at least once in their lives. Kaaba means cube. Indeed, the object of their veneration is a giant black cube. The word Kabbalah, which means knowledge in Jewish mysticism, also references a cube. In Greek mythology, Apollo and Artemis were born on the small island of Delos. As the story goes, the citizens of Delos consulted the oracle at Delphi to learn how to defeat a plague sent by Apollo. The oracle responded that they must double the volume of their cubic altar to Apollo. This rather difficult problem involving the cube root of 2 was known as the Delian problem in mathematics, which was later solved by the Pythagorean philosopher Archytas. Why are so many of the most important places symbolized by cubes? Recall that the cubit that measures Jerusalem is 1.728 English feet exactly. 1.728 is equal to 6 over 5 raised to the third power. I suggest you do the math to verify this is so. Come to think of it, the word cubit clearly comes from the word cube. So Jerusalem is symbolized by the volume of a cube whose edge length relates macrocosm to microcosm. If you dimension the Jerusalem rectangle in this way, with two depictions of 6 and 5, you'll see the x's themselves as representations of the great enigma of alchemy, namely the relationship between 6 and 5. Perhaps not surprisingly, the cubit that measures 1.728 English feet is actually the canonical Egyptian cubit. Many of the most significant events in Jesus' life are lined up along an axis. First of all, Jesus spent time teaching his disciples on the Mount of Olives. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday through this oldest of gates in Jerusalem's city walls, called the Golden Gate in Christian tradition. I can't help but think of the bridge in San Francisco. Here's Giotto's depiction of Mary's parents, Joachim and Anne, meeting at the Golden Gate. In Jewish tradition, this same gate is the one through which the Messiah will enter Jerusalem at some unknown point in the future. However, Suleiman the Magnificent sealed off the Golden Gate in 1541, literally to prevent the Messiah's entrance, and the Golden Gate and Temple Mount remain under Islamic control today. As you know, this tension between Muslims and Jews has persisted up to the present day. Jesus upset the money changers' tables in Herod's temple here, if we accept the Kaufman theory as to the location of the Second Temple. The Garden of Gethsemane is the place where Jesus prayed the night before his crucifixion. This is the place where he is said to have sweat drops of blood. As tradition has it, the crucifixion happened at Calvary, and his body was placed in the Holy Sepulchre just a few dozen feet away. Isn't it amazing that most of the important events in Christianity took place along an axis connecting the center of the X's in this diagram?
And I have a video here covering a subject I've been wanting to cover for a really long time, but I was just waiting for that one piece. Well, it seems I found that piece just yesterday, so I kind of want to get into this here. Now, what you're looking at right here, this is the Supreme Court building in Israel. And as you can see right there over on the left, that's an Illuminati pyramid with the sun symbol, or the eye, right there at the very top. It's a very common symbol that we all associate with the Illuminati, or the beast system, if you will. And here we find it on top of Israel's Supreme Court building. So I saw a video yesterday by a man named Paul Begley. Now, I imagine a lot of you that are subbed to me are probably subbed to him as well, just because we cover some similar subjects here and there. So Paul Begley is actually in Israel right now, and he uploaded a video yesterday where he'd actually filmed this pyramid on top of that building. So throughout the years I've been covering the subject of symbolism and the so-called Illuminati and all this. I've covered this for a really long time. I thought it was weird, man, and all the time I've covered it, this one somehow just kind of got past me a little bit. I've covered some things about Israel and the Illuminati, but never really went that deep into it. I've got a lot of pieces of the puzzle I've collected over the years, but this right here really set it in stone for me. So I wanted to do a video and just kind of cover a few things about this. This is a very, very important find. I did a little research online. I found about 4 or 5 years ago some people were talking about this and putting this out there. So it's not that this is exactly fresh, but I mean, as I said, even when I saw that video from Paul Begley, it was kind of fresh to me. I was like, whoa, and it really kind of struck me. So this was a really important catch as far as I'm concerned, and we definitely need to delve into this a little bit deeper. As I said, I've got some information on this stuff throughout the years, but seeing this video yesterday, it's like, okay, let's go ahead and dive into this some. It's important to understand that the same families who own and control the Federal Reserve and other major financial institutions have their eyes set on the Temple Mount and the holy city of Jerusalem. Just as the scriptures say, there's a man who will be revealed as the Antichrist, and he will sit there before the appearance of the Jewish Messiah, and many will receive him as their Messiah. And speaking of that, I've actually covered Dig, the TV series, in a few other videos, but it actually just concluded recently. But that right there was the whole idea behind this TV series, Dig. It was about establishing the Jewish Messiah. It was about these rituals they were doing at the Temple Mount to usher this in. They were performing these rituals at the temple that would essentially be Armageddon, the end of the world, and that would offer them the chance to bring in this Jewish Messiah. Even in the TV show, it was all about blood sacrifice. They were going to sacrifice this red heifer. As I said, I've covered that as well in some other videos. It's interesting to note, God wouldn't send men to that place anymore to perform blood sacrifices. His son's blood was the perfect sacrifice, so there's no need for us to shed the blood of dumb animals any longer. Yeshua did a perfect work, and remember, it was finished. What's kind of creepy and freaky about this is I do believe that the Antichrist, whenever it arrives on the national scene, it'll be accepted by most Christians as the Savior who can bring peace and safety, peace and order to the world. So ultimately, Jesus, Yeshua, will enter into that place, the holy mountain of God, and cleanse it. But before that happens, all hell is going to break loose in Jerusalem and the world. So with all that said, I want to explore a little bit more of this symbolism here at the Supreme Court. We'll even go inside some, and I just want to show you a few things. So this is a very, very touchy subject, and before I get into it, I just want to address a few things. It's not all the Jews, all right? I get this message on so many of my videos. It's like, why don't you ever talk about the Jews? It's the Jews, So much hatred for that entire race. Now, I refuse to do that. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that all religions are controlled by the devil. All religions are of the beast system. Islam has the cube. Many of us know about the cube and understand the symbolism there. The cube going back to Saturn or Saturnalia, or ultimately back to Satan. So a lot of layers to that particular onion right there. But once again, this is a religion that is controlled by the beast. Ultimately, even in America, if you look at most churches, because there's so many different denominations, right? All these different interpretations of God's word and what God's all about. Got all these buildings, but if you look at these buildings, and this is a typical example of most churches in America, if you look at these buildings, if you look right there in the lower left right there, they always have the pyramid with the sun in the middle, the sun symbol. This is why those lines are coming out. It's the illumination. Now, I'm not saying it's a bunch of Illuminati guys in black hoods, built these churches or whatever. This goes back to the connection with Freemasonry and religion. And that's all fine and good, and I wouldn't really have a personal issue with it if it wasn't for the fact that Freemasons take oaths of secrecy. So basically, whatever's happening in the church, or they're saying in the church, or saying in public, could be very different from what they're doing and saying and working on in private. But on the higher level of the pyramid, the higher level of the Freemason structure, it's definitely much darker up there. So these are examples of, once again, what I call that beast system. Remember, it is the enemy that is in control of all of these religions. We don't need religion. This is where it gets tricky. Now, that's not to say that the people that go to church or the people that go to synagogue or go to mosques or whatever are all evil and bad people either. These are the sheep. These are the little lambs. There are millions of people on this planet that are controlled by that beast system through their very religions. And this is regardless of what they hold in their hearts. There are really good people that fall for this stuff. I mean, I see it in my own family. I was one. I was raised in a church myself. I was one. I was raised in a church in the Midwest myself, and I'm glad I was. It gave me a really good understanding of the basics and the fundamentals of religion and whatnot, but it wasn't until I personally left the church and started researching for myself that I really started to connect with the very real spiritual battle that's taking place in our world all around us, and the insane grip that this beast system has on all of religion and on people's hearts and minds. And I'm not saying, don't go to church and this and that or the other. I mean, some people need that community. It's a good place to learn the basics and the fundamentals. I mean, the whole thing, right? It just didn't work for me. And I've been to pretty much every church you can imagine. I've got books on the Book of Mormon. I've got the English version of the Quran, Dianetics from L. Ron Hubbard, you name it. I mean, I've read about everything. I've been to a lot of different churches. I've mentioned in other videos I was actually in a bit of a cult in Maui. And there was no brainwashing. They didn't get me an MK Ultra or anything like that. But the guy that ran it was a charismatic and really, really good with words. And it didn't take long for me to realize this guy was cuckoo. It took a few months. The point is, we've all been deceived. We can all get pulled back into this beast system. So again, this is very touchy stuff. And I don't want anybody thinking this is anti-Semitic. Now, that's a big issue. This is what this Illuminati, if you will, these people at the top of the pyramid, have been hiding behind for decades now. Like, if you ever go against Israel or say anything against Israel, it's like automatically you're an anti-Semite. You know, you hate the Jews. That's all a psyop. It's social engineering. It's just a way to shut you down and keep your mouth shut. So once again, understand, I'm coming from a place of love. I see us all as brothers and sisters in Christ, whether people believe in that or not. That's how I see the world. The Supreme Court building sits on a plot of land next to the Foreign Ministry and the Central Bank of Israel. Now, it's important to note there's a lot of ley lines at play here as well. I'm not going to cover that so much here in this video. There's people out there that do really good work with that. There's a lot of things happening with the ley lines all around the Supreme Court as well. But that being said, it's important to understand that everything about this building has been thought out to the very finest detail. And I see it as absolutely diabolical. This is the devil's plan being put into place before we ever even realize it. The devil, knows its final battle will be here in Jerusalem. Now, if you're not familiar with the Rothschild family, please do a little research there. People always ask, who's the Illuminati? What do they look like? This is one of them. The Rothschild family is one of the Illuminati bloodline families. So it's interesting to note that the engineers who were chosen for this job by the Rothschilds were the grandson and granddaughter of a man who actually worked for Baron Rothschild. You also find their love of numerology all throughout this building and in the building process. It was important to the builder to have everything done according to the correct numbers. It's really interesting because all around the building you'll find these different pathways that you can walk through. And here's one right here. The larger circle you see at the bottom of the picture is actually an inverted cross. And this whole thing was designed for people to walk on. So this is actually a religious emblem placed there designed for people to trample on under their feet. So keeping in mind that we're approaching a one-world religion, okay, this is what's coming. This will be the beast system fully revealed, the Antichrist system. So this is why we find all the world religions represented in one way or another. For instance, right here, just beyond that Egyptian obelisk, lies a Muslim gravesite. Another thing you'll find all throughout the building and even out in the courtyard are multiple Hindu altars. And just in case there's still any doubt that the Rothschilds are actually behind this, this is one of the placards you find on the wall. The founder of the Rothschild dynasty and his 5 sons established all the central banks throughout Europe. The Rothschilds made several stipulations with the Israeli government before building the Supreme Court. And among them were that the Rothschilds would pick the plot of land to build the Supreme Court, they would use their own architects, and no one would ever know how much the building actually cost. It took them 4 years to build this structure with many secrets built into it. As I said, every element of this building was built according to occult knowledge. This right here is a great example. You find it right here that when you first enter the building, you actually find yourself on the journey. This entire journey is intended to bring one from darkness into the light and become an illuminated one. As you see here, when you very first enter the building, it starts off with dim lighting, but as you look up the stairs, you see the bright light that comes from a very large window that looks over parts of Jerusalem. It's also very important to note these steps here. There are 3 sets of 10 steps, making a total of 30. Now, as you ascend these 30 steps, you come from the darkness into the light. And from here you can see the world, or in this case the city of Jerusalem, like you've never seen it before. It's also worth mentioning that right here on the right side you'll see the old Jerusalem stone. Some even believe these same stones were used in the Second Temple. And on the other side you'll see the smooth modern wall. There are 6 lampstands going up that speaks to the man on his journey to gain his knowledge and become illuminated. But once again, I think it's very important to note that the ones who built this building built it to be, in their eyes, perfect and in their order of things, even numerically. And even right here, this is where we start getting a little bit deeper, but when you leave the center courtroom or the main courtroom, the base of the stairs you walk down, as you descend, you'll find the fertility symbol right there in the very center, which is always present in any of these so-called Illuminati structures. It's often kind of hidden, but it's always there. The symbol there in the center represents the woman, and then the, of course, staff or whatever you'd like to call that going through the center is the penetration. And speaking of that sign of fertility, we find it once again here at Wasilla High School. They actually made the statue a few years back, and this is Sarah Palin's territory right here. Once again, they're telling us that this is all about the, quote, warrior from within. Once again, alluding to the, if you will, female sexual organs, these signs of fertility. These things are often connected as well to the whole idea of goddess worship, and I've covered that in a lot of videos as well. So at this point, the term Illuminati is basically a catch-all phrase for the beast system, or the Antichrist system to come, the New World Order. There's still a lot of people out there that make fun of this symbolism. I see it all the time. I see a lot of really dumbed down things like this. You see this all the time online. Illuminati confirmed, pyramid, right? Well, I understand that. Now, there's different reasons why people do this. Some people just don't understand what's going on. I think other people probably see it, but it scares them. So they want to put stuff like this out, laugh at it, make fun of it, right? What these people are representing is this. It's this same symbol that we find on top of the Israeli Supreme Court building. The all-seeing eye with the pyramid, the beast system, the coming Antichrist system of the one world order to follow. If you really want to wake somebody up out there, I think this is a great example right here. You can show them this pyramid with the sun symbol or the all-seeing eye on top of the Israeli Supreme Court. Show them all the other symbolism that's taking place inside this building and around it. Show them all these celebrities that are doing the same symbol. Show them the movies, the advertisements, the TV shows. It's everywhere. This is something I cover on this channel extensively. So once again, folks, this is just another example of that beast system being our reality. The devil controls all of these religions and all of these governments on the entire planet. I know, a lot of people don't want to hear that. There's different names we can give it, the this, the that, the whatever, but ultimately it is what it is. It's going to go down in Jerusalem. All eyes on Jerusalem. Right? So anyway, folks, that's what I've got for you now. I appreciate you watching the video, and as I said, use this information as a tool to help wake up others, all right? Help them to see past this dumb, Illuminati confirmed stuff like that, okay? Show them the facts, show them the truth, and then let them figure out the rest for themselves, because a lot of people want you to just give them the answers, but oftentimes when you just tell somebody something, they don't totally take it in. So lead them down the path, give them the tools they need, the tools necessary to find out more about this hidden reality right before our very eyes.
Before we leave Jerusalem, I want to detour to a place you'd probably never expect me to go. Winnipeg, Canada. It's the capital of Manitoba, eh? Architectural historian Frank Albo has discovered the Manitoba Legislative Building is not only a reconstruction of Solomon's Temple, but is loaded with secrets in plain sight. The architect Frank Worthington Simon designed this 1920 building to be veiled in allegory and illustrated with symbols only his Freemasonic brothers would understand. In fact, every premier who worked in this building from 1870 to 1967 was a Freemason. 2 Egyptian sphinxes flank the entrance, just as they do in front of the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. The top of the dome features a 13-foot-high gilded statue of Mercury. The same golden boy we'll meet again in Paris. After going up 2 flights of 13 steps, one enters a cubic space measuring 66.6 feet on edge. We'll uncover the unexpected meaning of 666 in the most surprising of places in Paris. It's probably not what you think. According to Albo's research, 2 13-foot-high bronze bisons identify this as a cleansing room in temple vernacular. Going up another flight of 13 steps, one arrives in the rotunda. There's a mural on the wall of the rotunda above the entrance to the Manitoba Legislative Assembly that ostensibly depicts World War I. However, a man wearing a white robe with exposed chest, being supported by his brother, identifies him as an initiate in the first Masonic degree ceremony. Albo identifies this mural as the altar in what is secretly an initiation chamber. Looking up in the rotunda, you see the underside of the central dome the golden boy is perched upon. and looking down a level through an oculus in the floor reveals a fascinating space called the Pool of the Black Star. Just off the rotunda is the Lieutenant Governor's reception suite, which is the only space in the building off limits to the public. Albo got special permission to measure the chamber, and discovered it's a cube, having an edge length of 20 cubits. These are precisely the same dimensions as the Holy of Holies within Solomon's temple, a place that was also obviously off limits to the public. But if this represents the Holy of Holies within Solomon's temple, where is the Ark of the Covenant? Albo discovered it's directly above this suite on the building exterior. The war chest, as it's known, is flanked by 2 warriors, which one can accurately identify as Raiders of the Lost Ark. This building is clearly amazing, but why is it here? Albo points out that Winnipeg is at the geographical center of North America. The Black Star at the heart of the legislative building was deliberately placed upon this naval point. Okay, but what is the building really doing? I think the Manitoba Legislative Building was designed as a magical talisman to harvest, or in some sense control, the energies of North America. Consider a much older example of this type of talismanic magic. Old Sarum, which is the center point of ley lines in England, dates from the same era as Stonehenge, Avebury, and Silbury Hill. This radiating topology reminds me of one other magical artifact, the sun disk worshipped during the reign of King Tut's father, the pharaoh Akhenaten. If you think believing in magic is childish, consider Walt Disney's so-called Magic Kingdom. Did you know Disneyland has a mysterious Club 33, which is not open to the general public? We know from studying DC how important the number 33 is to Masons. Club 33 memberships cost $20,000, and it's the only place in Disneyland where alcohol is served. There's clearly more going on in the Magic Kingdom than meets the eye. I think the Black Star at the center of North America holds a much deeper secret. Physicist Nassim Haramein, whom you'll hear more about in Rome, believes that Moses took a compact power source out of the Great Pyramid and placed it inside the Ark of the Covenant before he left Egypt. Haramein showed how the Ark fits precisely within the misnamed sarcophagus inside the king's chamber within the Great Pyramid. It was misnamed because no mummy has ever been found in an Egyptian pyramid. By the way, the granite box's exterior volume is exactly double its interior volume, a mathematical relationship echoed thousands of years later in the Delian problem that plagued the Greeks. Perhaps there is nowhere else in the world with more layers of history and symbolism than Jerusalem. I can think of no better example of this than in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Its architecture is a patchwork made from so many untold layers. Calvary Chapel is built on the first foot or so of the rock upon which Jesus is said to have been crucified. Excavation that took place in 1973 revealed a chapel some 15 feet under this rock called the Tomb of Adam, where the first human skull is said to be visible in the rock face. In fact, the term Calvary comes from the Latin Calvariae locus, which is Golgotha in Greek, or place of the skull in English. Prior to the first Christian emperor Constantine the Great repurposing this site as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it had been a temple of Venus. Before the Romans worshipped Venus, she was known in the Greek world as Aphrodite. And if we dig deeply enough, we find yet another layer on top of the Egyptian Isis.